How many of you are excited about the Nexus 200? Come on. It is a big, huge, ginormous night tonight, and this is going to be absolutely incredible. For those of you that I've never met before, my name is Michael. I am the youth pastor here, and it is great to have every single one of you. There are tons of you, and I absolutely love it. We're in the middle of a series called, yes, this microphone is living the dream right now. We're in the middle of a series called Toxic right now. And the whole premise of this series that we're doing is we're talking about the different toxic influences that are found in your life. And whether you realize it or not, there's some things that are a part of your life that affect you in a negative way. And there are some things in your life that affect you in a positive way. And so for some of you, you have relationships, and Angel spoke on this last week. And by the way, I missed you all last week. Aww, that's so sweet. I did. Like it was Tuesday night, and I was on an airplane, and I really wanted to be here. So yeah, I just missed you guys last week. I heard Angel did an awesome job, and he talked about different relationships that we have. Yeah, you can give him a round of applause. Justin Madison has much love for Angel. I spot him giving him a shout out in the back. He talked about relationships and how there's some relationships that affect us in a positive way, and there's some relationships that affect us in a negative way. And the week before we talked about, or over the 2 weeks before that, we talked about different influences in your life and different thought processes you have, and all sorts of different things that take place in your life that can affect you in positive ways or toxic ways. And tonight we're going to talk about an element of something toxic that can be in your life that isn't talked about very much in the church. And so if you're not a church person, you might have fun tonight. If you're a church person, you might get offended tonight, and that's okay. I'm here to love you all. We're going to talk about toxic religion tonight. I know that's not a very popular element of toxic things that can take place, but that's what we're going to be addressing tonight, is there is a religious mindset or a religious idea that actually can poison what Jesus is trying to do in your life. I believe Jesus is here to be a life-changing component of our life, and religion oftentimes can get in the way of that. And so what I want to basically share is the overall point for this evening is that Jesus didn't come to make you religious. That was Jesus' last goal. He in no way, when Jesus came to this earth, and when Jesus walked around among people, which, by the way, in case you didn't realize, Jesus is not a fairy tale character. Like, there's Santa, not so real. Sixth graders, I might have just ruined your entire year. I'm sorry about that. Easter Bunny, might be real, but probably not. Tooth Fairy, real. Real, no joke. I found a quarter under my pillow. Don't you tell me that's not real. Tooth Fairy is no joke. Don't make fun. She'll come bust you up. Don't make fun of her. I'm not even joking. Tooth Fairy may be real, but there's a lot of things that aren't real, but Jesus wasn't one of those. Jesus really came here. He really walked this earth. He was really real. That's a tough concept, and sometimes we categorize Jesus as this just cosmic figure that we find in the Bible, and that's all he is. I want to let you know that Jesus came here for a purpose, and the reason why he came here was not to make you religious. In fact, he care less about that, honestly. He did not come to make you religious in any way. And so I want to point out something. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and flip open to the book of Galatians. And before we read that, while you're turning to Galatians, I want to give you the overall definition of the word toxic that we've been using for this entire series. And if we can get some house lights up, that would be absolutely incredible so I can see all these lovely faces. Toxic is defined as anything containing poisonous material capable of causing sickness or even death. Anything containing poisonous material capable of causing sickness or even death. So if we could, I want to take that definition and I want to throw religion in place of that. Religion can be something that causes sickness and even death. And that's a big statement to say right there. That's a big statement to say. And so I really, truly believe, in like the heart of my hearts, I believe that religion can very much get in the way of this. And if I can, I want to explain a little bit about this church that was found in the New Testament. If you all know, the New Testament was written to different churches, essentially. Like, we're in Crosswalk right now, and if you look at these different letters, like the book of Galatians, the book of Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, all these different books that Paul wrote, those were all groups of people that he wrote letters to. So he would be like, opposed to the book of Galatians, it would be the book of Williamsburgians. I don't know how you would label it, but I mean, it was letters written to groups of people. And the issue is there was one group that was called the Galatians. Man, and the Galatians jacked things up. Like, Jesus came and it was awesome. And Jesus came and he took all the covenants and all these different things that were in bondage to people. Not that the covenants were bad or the rules or the laws were bad, but they were holding people in bondage. And Jesus came and got rid of that. But then these Galatians got things confused. They took things and they kind of twisted it. You see, because when Jesus came, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the... There we go. Galatians would say, yes, Jesus, you are the way, the truth, and the life, but you also need to make sure that you have this right in your life. You know, Jesus is really good. Jesus is the way to heaven, but you need to add this extra part in order for it to be okay. And they got into some of the old covenants that took place in the Old Testament and some of the things that were talked about then, and they said, Jesus is good, and he's important, he's a part of the equation, but it needs to be Jesus plus something else in order for you to go to heaven. How many of you want to go to heaven? Can I just get a poll? This is good. You all want to go to heaven. I see 2 hands back on the camera, which is exciting. You all want to go to heaven. That's a good thing. I want to go to heaven. I have more motive than just that. But in order for me to go to heaven, if I was to listen to some of the Galatians, they would have said, Michael, in order for you to be good enough to go to heaven, you have to have, number 1, Jesus, and number 2, follow these rules. And that's not at all what Jesus talked about. In fact, when Paul wrote this letter, and this is the book of Galatians, when he wrote this letter, he debunked that entire thing. And so we're in Galatians chapter 1 right now. This is the very beginning of this letter, and this is what it says in verse 2 through 4. This is Paul speaking to the Galatian church. It says, I am shocked that you are turning away so soon from God, who called you to himself through the loving mercy of Christ. You are following a different way that pretends to be the good news, but is not the good news at all. You are being fooled by those who deliberately twist the truth concerning Christ. What took place was Jesus came and said, I am everything you need. And the Galatians added more onto it. And so Paul was saying, no, this is not the case. What the Galatians did was they poisoned Christianity. That's exactly what they did. They poisoned Christianity at its most core point. And what took place was they focused, and if you're writing notes, this is a good point right here. It says, they focused on the external rather than on the internal. They focused on what was taking place outwardly rather than what was taking place inwardly. And for me to break this down a little bit more, I'm going to read a passage for you from the book of Matthew, chapter 23. And it says in verse 25, it says, what sorrows await your teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but your insides are filthy, full of greed and self-indulgence. And can I tell you that phrase right there, and I'll explain it in a moment, but Jesus hates that concept. Let me break it down in a way that might make a little bit more sense for you. How many of you grew up going to church? Okay, that's most of you in this room. I know for myself, I didn't go to church on a regular basis until I was probably 15, 16, 17 years old, but we would go to church about once or twice a year when I was younger. Out of routine, that's what we did, and we would either go on Christmas or Easter. And what we would do when we go to church on Easter, and for those of you who have gone to church a lot, you may have experienced this. Maybe for some of you that haven't gone that much, you've experienced this. But we would put on our Sunday best. Sunday best. It's kind of this idea that if you're going to go to church, you have to wear the best clothes you have. And I didn't own a suit. I was like 3. 3-year-olds don't own suits, but my parents got me one, and so I'm getting like all snazzed up, looking really, really nice. And in order for me to go to church, I had to wear a suit. That was just the rule. I don't know why it was that. I mean, I was like 3, so my mom said, you put on a suit, you put on a suit. Not that I put on a suit at age 3. They probably did it for me. But the concept was I had to have a suit on in order to walk into the church. That was the rule. And I don't see that anywhere in the Bible whatsoever. And I've heard this story before. There was this woman, and she had a rough life. I mean, it was full of partying. It was full of, and we're not talking like the good type of partying. We're talking about the type of partying that is completely wears you out and that you are strung up on drugs and all these addictions and habits. And so her life was just a complete wreck at this point. And she did something really, really wild. She picked up the phone and she called a church in town. And she said, my life is tough right now. I'm looking for some help. Can I come to church? And they said, yeah, go ahead. Come on, join us. And so she pulled up, and everyone in the entire church was so excited. They're like, man, we're going to have a visitor today, which, by the way, if you get excited for one visitor, that means there's not many visitors coming through your door. And so there weren't many people coming through their door, and so this new person came in, and they're all excited, like, we're going to have one new person. This is going to be awesome. And this girl pulls her car up, and everybody knows it's her because it's like she's not the normal person that comes here. And so she opens up the door, and she steps out, and most people are wearing, like, suits. They're wearing nice dresses. They're wearing their Sunday best. And she is wearing less than her Sunday best. She looks like she's just had a really, really rough night the night before, and so she comes just as she is, and she gets out of the car, and instantly everyone's like, just looking at her. She starts to make her way up to the front of the church, and a man comes up and says, here at this church, you have to wear your best to be a part of us. Can you imagine what took place inside for her? She decided she was going to reach out and try to encounter God. And the moment she reached out, they looked at her and they said, that's not going to do it. And what takes place a lot of times is there's this idea that we have to measure up to this standard, that like we're right here and we need to be like up here in order for us to be somebody who is good enough to be used by God. We have this desire. We say, God, use me, but I look at myself and I'm thinking, how in the world can God use somebody like me? And so you start to do things to try to become super Christian, and you decide, if I'm going to be a Christian, I'm going to have to make sure I dress the right way, and I'm going to have to make sure that I have the look, if you will, that makes me look like a Christian person. You do all of these steps trying to make sure that you will fit in and be a Christian. And the reality is as hard as you try to be this good Christian, as hard as you are to try to fit into this, you're still quite a ways away from God. Like, I'm not much closer to God right now than you are when it comes to distance. I've made it like 3 feet further. And you've tried, you've done everything you can. You've tried to work your way up to being this Christian, and it's not working. And that's because your faith and your relationship with Jesus and where you stand in relevance to heaven is not based on Jesus plus your hard work. It's not based on Jesus and trying to do this. It's based on simply the fact of Christ. That's what it's built on. And so this idea of us needing to look the right way on the outside, that's not how it works. And to be frank right now, I don't care whether you come from a great home, whether you come from a terrible home, whether you are super tall or super short. I don't care whether you have all the money in the world or whether you have no money whatsoever. I don't care whether you have a boyfriend or girlfriend or whether you don't have that many friends at all. It doesn't matter whether you're wearing the right brands, whether you're wearing the wrong brands, whether you're wearing no brands at all. You are welcome here just the way you are. No strings attached. We are glad that you're here and we love you. It's because this is the church. And the church is not about what you look like on the outside. It's about what's taking place here on the inside. In that Galatian church, and so many religions get that completely confused. I think in the same way that some people get so consumed with trying to be so good, we have people that are on the exact opposite of that. And we have people that are, to be pretty honest, their toxic religion is promoting spiritual pride. And I want to read a story from you out of the book of Luke, chapter 18, verses 10 through 12. And this is a really, really awesome story. And if you have your Bibles, flip to that. If you don't, it's on the screen, or you can just listen because this is an awesome story that took place in the New Testament. It says, 2 men went to the temple to pray. One of them was a Pharisee, the other was a despised tax collector. Now let me explain for a second. Tax collectors aren't good people at that time. Well, they're okay people now, I guess. I'm not going to get into that. Tax collectors, they were not people that were very well liked, because what tax collectors would do would say, hey, you made this much money, I'm going to take as much as I want. And they just took money from people, basically. They were kind of like legal criminals, if you will. And so tax collectors were not liked by people in the community. And so there was this Pharisee and there was this tax collector. And the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed this prayer. And I have a feeling that was this very, very holy prayer he did. He goes, I thank you, God, that I am not a sinner like everyone else. For I don't cheat and I don't sin and I don't commit adultery and I'm certainly not like that tax collector over there. I fast twice a week, and I give you 1/10 of my income. And it was this Pharisee, this religious person that was so puffed up about himself. And some of you that are checking out right now, you need to listen for a second. Because there are a lot of you in here, and you have this idea that you're the super great Christian, and I'm just getting pumped up about this because this fires me up beyond belief. There's so many Christians that think they're great. Now, if you think you're a good person and you love yourself, good. I'm glad you have high self-esteem. Keep that up. That's a good thing. But there's things that go further than that. When you go, man, I got 4 versions of the Bible in my backpack every single week, and I did my 7th devotion today, and I pray for everybody I know, and I go to church 37 times a week, and maybe that's some of you, maybe that's not. How many of you have met people like that? Okay. Maybe some of you haven't. Maybe I'm the only person that meets people like that. I meet people that are super Christians. And I don't like them, for lack of better words, because they get so consumed. I just broke. Whose phone case is this? This is your phone case. I just broke it. I'm sorry. Back to, I screw up. I broke things. I'm human. Sorry. There are people who get so fired up about the fact that they have all this good stuff. And so this is how I felt one of the first times I walked into church. No lie. I'm going to use this ladder as an illustration. And by the way, I'm just happy about ladders today, and you're going to be okay with that because I have a microphone and you don't. What I felt like is I was this person who walked into church, and I saw all these churchy people, and I looked up, and I saw them, and they were like, ah! It was like standing up on the ladder. They were these super Christians. And I walked in, and I felt like the worst person in the entire world. I didn't know the Bible. I didn't have a Bible. I didn't know all the songs, and they like lifted their hands during worship, and I didn't know what they were doing, like whether somebody scored a touchdown or what was taking place. And I looked up at these super Christians, and I didn't get it. And here's what was even worse. It wasn't like there was people who love God. That's good. The part that frustrated me is there was a bunch of people who called themselves Christians, and the entire time they were like staring down at me like, you are a sinner. You're going to burn in hell forever. And I'm like, ah! I mean, I was scared to death because these people were like looking at me, and I felt about this big. And if you're new to church, and maybe this is your first time here, I don't know, you may walk into a place like this and you feel like people are just tearing you down and you don't belong and you're not accepted. Because some people, and if you're not careful, you become a Christian that is filled with spiritual pride, and you are so puffed up and you stand up on this high pedestal and you think you're so great when the reality is you're a sinner just like the rest of us. It's toxic religion. It's religious practices that completely pervert what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to save people. Jesus came to love people. Jesus came to make a difference in lives, not to make people feel bad about themselves. And for some of you, you're doing a good job, but some of you need to put yourself in check because there's some things that are going on that aren't exactly what they're supposed to be. I have one more thing for you, and this is the main point I really, really, really want to drive home tonight. The question is, why did Jesus come? Why did God send Jesus down here? And I think a lot of you have an idea of what this means. Most of you that are in this room right now have been to church before, and you come, and I'm hitting on this. You say, Jesus came to die for my sins so that I can have eternal life. Jesus came so that I can spend forever in heaven. How many of you have heard that? Okay, turn to the person next to you and say, Jesus came so I can go to heaven. Okay, good. You all can talk, and you're with me right now. The problem is that's the only idea of what you have about God. You have this idea of Jesus as this person he's this person who came and is like, hey, here, go to heaven, yay. And you're like, oh, wonderful. And that's where Christianity stops. And it's really, really, really frustrating because Jesus came for so much more than that. Here is why Jesus came. You can't gain God's approval. I'm just going to tell you that you can't gain God's approval. I don't care if you're, some of you all are talking in the center, stop right now, thank you. You can't gain God's approval at all. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to do it. And that's a tough reality for some of you that are more on the perfect side. And for some of you, you're like, obviously, I can't gain God's approval. Look at me. I'm not that person that can gain somebody's approval. And I understand that. The reason why God sent Jesus here was exactly for that. You can try as much as you want. You can try as hard as you want. But you're never going to be good enough for heaven. It says very, very clearly in the book of Romans, chapter 3 and verse 20. It says, for no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. I'll say that again. It says, for no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. You can't make it yourself. And that's the main truth. And we've been going through this toxic series, talking about all these toxic influences that we have. And yes, there are different toxic things that, bring us down in our faith. There's toxic things that get us distracted from God. There's toxic things all around us. But the most toxic thing that could ever be in this world is the idea that we're okay by ourselves. We're good enough just the way we are. I'm okay. I got it. I go to church. I worship. I love God. I read my Bible. I'm good enough. I'm ready to go. That's not it. You're never going to be good enough. You always have to have Jesus in the right spot. And as Christians, you can very, very easily fall into this trap. You can fall into this trap that everything's okay, I'm good, I'm safe, Jesus saved me, and your faith stops right there. Jesus wants more from you than that. Jesus wants you to be so incredibly active in your faith. It says in the book of Romans chapter 3, verse 23, and I'm going to continue on this and hit one more verse. It says, for everyone has sinned and we all fall short of God's glorious standard. And that's the verse that says basically all of us by ourselves, we're not good enough. But this is the verse that I absolutely love. It says, we are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus. And this is true for everyone who believes. For absolutely everyone, no matter who we are. Romans 3, verse 22. Christianity is not just for those of you that are here at Nexus tonight. Christianity is not just for people who go to church. Christianity is for everyone. Every single person who has ever walked this earth. If you look around right now, tonight's the Nexus 200. And our goal was to have 200 people come here because the greatest thing in the world is the concept that Jesus can save us, that Jesus makes us good enough. Us plus Jesus is enough. Not us plus Jesus plus doing good things is enough. No, just us plus Jesus is enough. That's the greatest news there is. That's why we have the Nexus 200. There are 500 seats in here that are empty. And there are more than that of people who don't know that. And it says the good news, the gospel is for everyone. Is everyone good people? Yes. Good. You all got that one. Is everyone for bad people? Is everyone for people who have their act together? Is everyone people who don't have their act together? Is everyone for the person that has friends at the lunch table? Is everyone for the person who doesn't have friends at the lunch table? Is everyone for the person who gets straight A's? Is everyone for the person who's barely passing their classes? Is everyone for the person who's failing all of their classes? Is everyone for the person that loves their parents? Is everyone for the person who can't get along with their parents? Is everyone for the person that's in a relationship, that's not in a relationship? Everyone means everyone. Yes, everyone means everyone. How many of you saw somebody today? Good, you have eyeballs. Everyone means everyone. And what takes place is we have this toxic idea of religion, that religion is we have to come to church, we have to sit really nice in our seat, we have to raise our hands and read our Bible, and that's what church is. That's what religion, no, that's not what it is at all. There are people that you come in contact with every single day that aren't going to walk in this building. There's going to be people that you see tomorrow at CU at the pole, and they know who Jesus is, and that's absolutely incredible. And I'm just walking around talking to everybody because I feel like it right now. It's intimidating when you all turn around like that. Here is what I want to see take place in this toxic series that we're doing. We're doing a series about negative things that influence us, and one of the negative things that influence you all is what's taking place here tonight. You have this idea that Christianity only takes place in this room. And that's not true at all. That is not true whatsoever. Christianity is what takes place in that everyday conversation you have with somebody. Christianity is what takes place more often outside of this room than what's inside this room. Here, let me give you a question for you. I want to put you on the spot for a moment, and I'm not going to make you answer it. If somebody watched you every moment of the day except when you were in church, would they know you're a Christian? Think about it for a second. If they watched what you do when you weren't here, would they know that you believe in Jesus? For some of you, yes. For some of you, no. And it may seem like I'm being a little bit, intense tonight. But the reality is there's people that are separated from God. There are people that are hurting. There are people that are not doing well in life. And here's the sad part. This is what most religion is. And this involves Buddhism. This involves Hinduism. This involves any form of deism you can think of. What takes place is people try everything they can to get to heaven. They say, I'm not going to do this bad thing anymore. I'm going to make sure that I try really hard and that I help people with this. I'm going to make sure that I love people. If I do enough good things and I love enough people, what's going to take place is I'm going to go into heaven. And I'm going to try really, really hard to make sure I don't cuss, except when I stub my toe, because then it's okay to cuss, right? No, that's another thing. I'm going to make sure I don't sleep with my boyfriend or girlfriend. I'm going to make sure that I love my parents. I'm going to make sure that I don't speed. I can go 5 miles an hour over because that's okay, because that's Christian speeding, and there's no problem with that at all. I'm going to make sure that I follow the rules in school, and you try everything you can to get up higher and higher. And guess what? When I get all the way up to here, calm down for a second. Calm down for a second. Please don't miss this. Don't miss this. I am not any closer to God right now than you are. I am not any closer to God than you are right now. I have given everything I can to get up here. I have tried as much as I can. I've tried to do the most I can every single step of the way. And I'm not any closer to God. Because it doesn't matter what faith you choose other than a faith in Christ, it's not going to get you where you want to go. It's religion, and it's toxic, and it leads to, frankly, hell. It's exactly where it leads. And so tonight, I have two things, and I want to ask Ben to go ahead and come on up. I have two things that I want to get across. Some of you, you've come here for the first time, and you're like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. We came in, people ran around with microphones and threw shirts at me. And then this curtain flew open and this band played, and then the lights went off, this video played with a bunch of people talking about a flagpole. And then some guy came up and ran around on ladders. And that's my whole experience with church. Let me sum it up for you. If you've never been here before, I'm going to make this very, very simple. God sent Jesus here because by yourself you're not going to be able to make it. Every single one of us have tried and we've given everything we can, but the fact is by ourselves you're not going to make it. And so God sent Jesus here because Jesus is more than enough. And there's somebody in here, I don't know who you are, but I know there's somebody in here, you've never heard that before. You've never, ever heard that before, and you're having difficulties, and I don't know what your difficulty is. I don't know who I'm speaking to right now, but there's somebody in here, and you've had just a difficult time in life, and you're saying, I'm not able to do this anymore. And Jesus came to give you rest. Jesus came so you could have that relationship restored with a God who loves you. And if that's you, I know there's someone I'm talking two in here, and your heart's probably beating right now, and that's normal. And in a second, I'm going to ask you to respond to that. And now there's others of you. And if that first group was you, I'm just going to put you on pause for a second. For the rest of you, you come to church week in and week out, and you have this idea that Christianity takes place in this building, and you don't take your Christianity outside of this room. You leave it right here every single week. You come in, you do your church thing, and you leave. And that is toxic. That is as toxic as can be. What you're doing is not real. What's real is when your faith leaves this room and your faith becomes who you are, and people are able to say, that person's different. They love Jesus, and I can see it. And some of you this school year, you've gotten off track already. We're only in the we're still in September right now, and you've already gotten a little bit off base, and you're not living the way you're supposed to, and you know it. You need to get right with God tonight. These toxic things have seeped in without you knowing it. And you're further from God than you want to be. And so I'm going to make this a time for people to be able to respond. A big part of authentic, non-toxic faith is when you're willing to say, I don't care who's next to me. I don't care what's going on. Jesus, I just want you to be real in my life. Jesus, I need you desperately in my life. And there's some of you that need to start that relationship with Jesus tonight. You've never had that before. You have no idea what it means. You just know that you want it. You want peace. You want happiness. You want a life that means something. And there's others of you that had that at one point, but it's just slipped away in some way. You need to get that back together. And so in a second, I'm going to count to 3, and I'm not doing this to make it a big event. I want you to find a place somewhere in this auditorium. I don't care whether it's up here. I don't care whether it's along the side. I don't care whether it's in the back. I don't care whether it's in your seat right now. But just how you are, you, not putting on a mask, just you as you. I want you to have a moment to be able to respond to this and say, God, I don't want toxic religion anymore. I want the pure and true, undefiled religion. So I want to pray for you for a brief moment, and then I'm going to count to 3. And when I do, I want you to get up from your seat and go to a place where you can be alone with God. If you bow your heads with me. Father God, we know that you sent your Son here, and that your Son is more than enough for us. And God, we know that by ourselves there is no way that we are going to be good enough. And God, we need you in our life. And God, I know that there's somebody in this room that doesn't have a relationship with you and doesn't know what it means, and they've been fighting it for a while. And God, you want to be in their life. And so, students with your heads down, I want to ask, and I know there's someone in here. Don't fight it. If that's you and you say, I need to start that relationship with God, I want you to raise your hand right now. You all can put your hands down. There's several hands that went up right there. I believe there's one more person in here. Please, students, keep your heads down. I think there's one more person in here that needs to start that relationship with God tonight. And if that's you, I just want you to raise your hand right now. I think there's one more person in here. I see your hand. You can put your hands down. There's others of you that need to get back on the right track, and you have this fake sense of religion. You need to get authentic religion with Christ. And when I say 3, I want you to find a spot. Maybe find your small group leader and take a time to get right with Jesus. If you were one of the first that raised your hand, when I say 3, I want you to come down here to the altar. And for the rest of you, I want you to find that spot. And tech team, if you could lower the house lights for me. 1, 2, 3, if that was you, come up here. Not because people around you are doing it,